Hello, boys and girls. Lord Hawkeye here again, and welcome to the story of my second campaign I've done with this same group. So, without further ado, let us begin. Now, this one took place on a different continent than the one that the City of Union did. And unlike the City of Union, who very much welcomed Mamano because they just brought more business to the city and they were all for that, in this continent it was ruled by an empire called the Grey Order, and they didn't take well to the arrival of Mamano at all. For various reasons, they viewed Mamano as demons and thought they were corrupting mortals, and they began a huge campaign of persecution against them. Mamano and anyone associated with them were arrested, imprisoned, and eventually executed. Real bad all around. So, enter our characters. We had Liana, a Valkyrie paladin. We had Sukudo, a Nuria-Nago rogue. Nuria-Nago are a slime race, as you can see here. We had Durdana, an Arachne monk. We had Jathal, a Briar-born herbalist. We had Lilac, a Yuki Onna Cylon, and I cannot remember her full name. It was Mel something, and a lot of people just called her Mel, so we're just going to have to stick with that. A succubus wizard. And we had a Saurian oracle who, tragically, I cannot find his name. I looked and I looked, I just could not find it. I really tried. But nothing that can be done. Anyway, that was our group. They were all people who had crossed the Empire in some way, and they were arrested, and they were in prison. Yes, I pulled a Bethesda. I am sorry. No, I'm not. So anyway, so they start off in prison, and they're visited by this bishop who came there, and for reasons they weren't sure of at the time, he provided them with the means of escaping their cells in various ways. Like, would slip them things that would allow them to get out, like he slipped a lockpick to the rogue and stuff like that. So they get out of their cells, they meet each other, and decide they're going to escape together. And so they eventually do. And on their way out, they meet the same bishop who helps them get out of the city. So they go with him out of the city, but along the way, they're ambushed by one of the high crusaders of the empire, who attacks them, and the bishop stays to hold them off while they make their escape. And it looks like he sacrificed himself completely for them. They still had no idea why, and unfortunately he never got a chance to tell them. So they were on their own, they got barely any supplies, and they're on the run from the Empire, so pretty tough situation for them. Eventually, they come to a village that's on the outskirts of the Empire, so the Empire doesn't have much reach there, so they're at least somewhat safe from them. But of course the village itself had its own problems. They were being harassed by these werewolves, a whole clan of them who lived in a castle. So they weren't just savages, like they were a little more sophisticated. And they were being pressured into accepting the werewolf curse and joining them. The villagers didn't want to, but it's becoming pretty clear they couldn't hold out for much longer because they had no real defenses. The party managed to win their trust, and they eventually secured a silver mine. And what was interesting about this group was they wanted to go through the campaign and avoid killing. They wanted to avoid killing. And I threw them a bone on this because in the Mamano lore, there is actually a special metal made from silver that that Mamano typically use, that when it strikes people, it turns translucent and instead drains their spirit energy rather than actually cutting them. And Mamano used that to subdue people without actually hurting them, because all that happens if you take enough damage from them is it renders you too exhausted to continue fighting. So they used these and they avoided killing. In fact, they went through the whole campaign and barely ever killed anybody, with a couple notable exceptions. Anyway, but we'll get to that. So eventually they managed to get into the werewolf's castle and they confronted him. And when they subdued him and tried to talk him down, and they were actually succeeding, when suddenly he's killed by a Fury. Furies they're fallen angels who have become devils. Devils being the creatures who exemplify the lawful evil alignment. They make deals with mortals. They're very scheming and manipulative and stuff like that, unlike demons who are just rah rah kill kill. Anyway, So they fight her, and they get the best of her, but she teleports away. So apparently this werewolf lord had made a bargain with her at some point. They weren't exactly sure why or how that happened, but there you go. They finally got their explanation. So they took over the castle and used it as their own base. And the village, of course, absolutely loved them and started helping them any way they could. And their next course of action was they needed to secure these lands so the Empire wouldn't come a-knocking someday when they hear what was going on. So there was some magic items they needed to get from the Imperial City. Long story behind that, I won't get into it, but they snuck into the Imperial City to get these, and they had to do some big stealth operation to steal them from the Imperial vaults. It was real interesting. But the main takeaway from all of that was at some point they had to fight this criminal who actually used to be the jailer who was the jailer that they fought to get away from the prison, and he ended up getting dismissed because he let them escape, I believe. But what the interesting thing that happened was the rogue had this gang in the city that she associated with. They were kind of like her contacts. And they met up with them and they helped them set everything up in the city. And they helped them find hiding places and stuff like that. Now when they fought this guy, when they'd gotten him down, suddenly he gets shot by 2 bullets and explodes into fire that kill him in this horrible fashion, just real painfully. And it was one of the members of the rogue's gang. When she demands to know why she did that, she reveals that this guy had arrested her and her husband a long time ago, and when she begged him to spare her husband, he instead murdered him right in front of her, really cruelly. The guy was not a very nice guy. And just as she revealed this, another devil appeared. This one's called a harvester devil. They're mainly in charge of making contracts with mortals. Most devils can, but they're specially for that. And a fiery hole appears below her and is about to pull her in. He explains that she made a deal with him a long time ago. She wanted revenge against the guy who killed her husband, and now it was time to collect. And when the rogue tried to stop him, he taunted her by offering her the chance to give her soul in exchange for her friends. Now, obviously, she couldn't accept that, so she had no choice but just stand idly by as he pulled her friend into hell. And this got the rogue having a serious hate-on for devils after that. Now, from the information they'd gathered, I can't remember exactly when they figured this out, but what they worked out was there was a devil operation working in the Empire, and these devils had a very simple business model. Vengeance for the price of your soul. They would go to mortals who had been wronged in some way, and they would offer them a deal. They would give them a chance to get revenge on the person who wronged them, and they would find this person, torment them, torture them, and eventually drag their soul to hell. But in exchange, the mortal himself would condemn his own soul to hell as well. And that's what she got roped into. She was emotional at the time and probably wasn't thinking straight, but doesn't matter. The deal was a deal. So the rogue had gotten a huge hate-on for devils. She just hated them. In fact, she took on a prestige class that specializes in countering and infiltrating devils. She could steal their powers. If someone teleported near her, she could hitch a ride with them. She could disable their abilities and stuff like that. She was really good at countering devils. So, there was a neat story behind getting that prestige class, but I'll get to that in a minute. So they were starting to get hints that devils were operating in the Empire, and they were starting to wonder, is that the reason for the crusade against the Mamano? Were there devils responsible for that? They were considering as a possibility. Spoiler warning, yes, there was influence there. So, eventually they got the items they needed, and they set about creating defenses in the land to prevent the Empire from being able to easily move on their territory that they had now established. So everything was good there for a while. And then one day they got a visit. A lone Imperial guard came to their castle, and he was horribly wounded. Looked like he'd been in just a brutal fight. He was barely alive and begged them for help. And, well, they took pity on him and brought him in to ask him what was going on, because he definitely didn't look like he was faking this. He was really dying. They managed to heal him and patch him up, and he explained his situation. He told them that his unit had been out scouting when in the middle of the night, they were attacked by this group of warriors, and he couldn't really get a good look at them, but what he did note was that these guys not only could fight in the dark with no problems whatsoever for some reason, they also were amazingly well organized. Like, they all fought in perfect unison with each other. It was like they were all the same creature. It was really bizarre, as he describes. And they said that they took his unit along with his commander, and he begged them for help. So, the people who had been tormenting them for all this time, one of them was now begging them for help, and they were his only hope. What would you do? Well, they did agree to help. So they, based on his directions, investigated and found the lair of these warriors, and sure enough, the lair was full of devils. And the guys they had fought, they were called Legion Devils. They were basically Hell's foot soldiers, and like he described, these guys are like incredibly well organized. Individually, they're about as strong as an average human soldier. But what was neat about them is they have a hive mind, so the more there are in a group, the stronger they are, and they all fight perfectly well together. So they were really fun to use as foot soldiers for these guys. They went in further in. They found a torture area. There was like pain devils and chain devils who were torturing this guy's unit for information. They managed to free them, to their surprise, who their rescuers were. And they went further in, and they found the same Fury who they had fought earlier. She was responsible for this. And she was in contact with the Harvester Devil who had taken the soul of the rogue's friend. So they found this was all connected. They managed to fight her, and this time they defeated her. And they went through her records and found out more about this organization. They were called the Obsidian Heart. And they found these guys had a lot of influence in the Empire. So things were starting to come together. Things were starting to make sense of what was going on here. Oh, and what also was happening as all this was going on, several of the party members had actually been approached by devils earlier trying to get them to agree to contracts. Because when they started interfering with the devil's plans, their first course of action was, okay, let's see if we can corrupt these guys and get them out of our hair and get their souls in at the same time. And there was a couple good scenes in there, like the succubus wizard. She was kind of vain. She kind of viewed herself as nobility and stuff like that. And one of them came to her and showed her a magic mirror with the image of this really luxurious room, and there was a woman in like a beautiful gown, everything inside. And he explained that what she was looking at was the Empress, the wife of the Emperor. And that she was looking through the eyes of one of their agents who was standing in the room, invisible, unbeknownst to her. If she agreed to the contract, he would step forward, kill the Empress, and they would put Mel in her place. So she'd have all the luxury, all that stuff, and she'd have the ear of the Emperor. She could stop the war and do so much for her kind. All she had to do was sign over her soul. Pretty tempting offer. But of course she didn't agree to it, and she would later find out how screwed she would have been if she had agreed to it. I didn't think they were going to agree to it, but there was the possibility, and it wouldn't have gone well for them if they had. But probably the most interesting one that happened was the Liana, the Valkyrie paladin. She had a whole village of Valkyries on a mountain that had been conquered by the Empire, and they killed everybody. She had been raised by humans, and despite everything that happened, she became a paladin. She followed the path of honor. She didn't believe in vengeance and stuff like that. She did want the Empire to stop what they were doing, but she tried not to let what happened cloud her mind. When she was out visiting the ruins of her village, she was visited by one of the devils who created an image of their leader. He was a pit fiend by the Lord Kulzu, that was his name. And A pit fiend are basically the nobility of devils. They pretty much look like your archetypal devil. Big 20-foot guy covered in red scales. Really cool looking. But anyway, he contacted her, giving her the usual spiel. Like, despite their appearance, devils are very well spoken. And he told her he had a gift for her. He revealed this a man who was strapped to this device. He had like spiked chains wrapped around his hands and his legs and his neck, and he was attached to this horrible looking torture device. And he explained to her that he was the soldier who led the attack against your people. Not only that, he was the one who came into her parents' house and fought and killed them. He signed up for the mission, all just so he could get a promotion. And now he was right in front of her, strapped to this device, and with a switch in front of her. All she had to do was pull the switch, and this machine would subject him to a horrible, horrible death. Like, if she had, what would happen is the chains would tighten onto his limbs and slowly twist all of them off, one by one, in an absolutely brutal fashion. And it was a really emotional scene for her too, but she refused despite his protests. So he disappeared, and she freed the soldier from the thing. And that's when he revealed that after he killed her parents, he saw her as a baby there, and realized that they weren't hostile. They were trying to protect their child. And now that's when it really sank into him what he had done. He felt so bad about it that he took her and, in the middle of the fight, ran away with her in hand and left her with people that he knew would take care of her. He admits it was all just to soothe his guilty conscience. He apologized. He never forgot what had happened and wished he could have done things differently, but it was too late to turn things back then. And to his surprise, she forgave him. He couldn't believe it, but he was incredibly grateful to her and went back. So that was just a couple of stories of how the devils tried to corrupt them, but it didn't work, thankfully. So now they had a clear idea of what was going on. And what also was happening a lot recently was they had gotten calls by a strange figure. Like, they had these magic mirrors they used to communicate with each other for a lot of their missions. And several times they had been contacted by a man in a mask who would warn them of Imperial activities or that they were going to be attacked and stuff like that. They didn't know who this person was or why he was helping them, but eventually the masked man contacted them again and told them that the bishop who saved them, he was alive, but he was set to be executed. The Empire had this giant furnace where they would burn people alive in, and he was going to be next in line for it, and he begged them to come and try to save him, which of course they did. They owed this guy their lives, so they figured it was the least they could do to repay the favor. They broke into the Imperial City again and broke into the prison, and they did manage to save him, only to find the Harvester Devil was in charge of the execution, so he was in disguise and working amongst the Empire. And the furnace wasn't just a furnace. It was this powerful called a Hellfire engine, which is like a huge construct that's powered by Hellfire, the very essence of Hell, and powered by souls, the souls of all the people burned in it. And he activated it, and they tried to fight it, and this thing was pretty much invincible. They tried everything, could not put a dent in this thing, and whatever damage they could do, it healed it very quickly. So it was looking bad for them when suddenly the masked man appeared in person and helped them escape. So once they were clear and finally safe, the masked man finally explained who he was and why he was helping them. He pulled off his mask and revealed he was Prince Henrin Thorazin, the son of the Emperor. He explained to them that he's seen what the Empire's done. He's seen that it hasn't just been hurting Mamino and people like that. It's also been neglecting its own people, fighting this war. And he's tried to talk to his father. He's tried to talk to everybody. Nobody listens to him. And he feels, as the prince, it's his responsibility to set things right. He feels the Empire's going down a dark path and he has to stop them. And since they won't listen to him, he figured the only thing he could do was throw his lot in with them. He asked them if they would allow him to come with them and help, and they agreed. So now they had the prince of the Empire on their side, so things were looking up. But the Empire and the Obsidian Heart now had this Hellfire engine, who they were eventually going to sick on their castle, and there was no way they could stop it if that happened, because as they saw, this thing seemed to be invincible. So it was tough. What would they do next? Let's see. There was another great scene that happened. To try to get whatever information they could about the Hellfire engine, the rogues snuck into this noble's house that they managed to track down where this harvester devil was. He was posing as a noble in this mansion. She snuck into his house, and she found him in his study writing a letter and looking kind of nervous about it, especially when one of his men came in and said that his superior was coming to collect his weekly reports. He locked the letter in his desk and went downstairs. Of course, being a rogue, she was curious, and she picked the lock and read it. It was him writing to a rival lord of his lord and offering to deliver the Hellfire engine to him, and he was basically planning on defecting to another lord. So she took this letter in hand and went downstairs and saw his report on the table. She needed the information, this report, so she swiped his report and replaced it with the letter of defection. So when his superior came in, he ended up taking that, reading it, and he was not happy when he read that. So the harvester devil ended up getting apprehended and was probably set to be killed or demoted for that. So she got her nice little bit of revenge there. Anyway, but how to deal with the Hellfire engine? They had no way to stop this thing. The Oracle, he did some investigating of himself. He had a prophetic dream that helped point him in the right direction. And eventually he learned that the Hellfire engine had once been used before. It had been used to destroy this dwarven city that they had explored earlier. There was signs of it before, but they didn't really piece it together until now. And there was a dwarf who had worked on a way to try to stop it. And no one knows if he was successful because he never came back from his journey. What he had studied was a metal called eternal ice. It had magical properties, but no one had ever found a way to really work them before. It couldn't really be forged, and alchemy didn't really work on it either. It seemed to just resist every attempt to try to do anything with it. And he believed it held the key to stopping the Hellfire engine, because this stuff basically had the power to extinguish hellfire, which is normally not supposed to be possible. But he had to find a way to unlock its power. So he journeyed off to go find one. So they set about following in this dwarf's footsteps in hopes that maybe they could find some clue. And they were on the run with this Hellfire engine hunting them. And after a big long journey, I won't get into the details of, they eventually did. They found that he had found a way to, it was kind of like meditating and through force of will, reshaping it into a weapon in order to fight the Hellfire engine. They eventually got there, and they found that he had almost completed it. He was only a few moments away from finishing before he was slain by the Hellfire engine. I can't remember what it was that killed him, but they found his body there, and the eternal ice, like just almost complete, but not quite. And the Hellfire engine was right on their heels. So the Durdana, the Arachne monk, had to set about meditating and completing his work while they held off the Hellfire engine. They had to fight it, and eventually she managed to succeed, and she created an amulet that basically delivered its power through her fists. And she went in and fought the Hellfire engine, and basically every time she touched it, it would put out its engine and weaken it, which would give them the chance to destroy this thing. And eventually they did. They were victorious over the Hellfire engine. Now the biggest threat against them had finally been stopped. And without the Hellfire engine in their way, they could now set about going full rebellion on the Empire. So they had gathered all their forces. They get everything in motion. The prince had had a plan in place. They were going, while they were getting the Empire's attention on the outside, they were going to sneak in and they were going to directly confront the Emperor and demand answers from him and see if all this could be stopped. And if it couldn't, the Empire had a law in place that if you believe someone above you is acting against the interests of the Empire, you have something called the right of usurpation. You can forcibly pull him from power, because the imperial law is very clear that treason, even at the highest level, would not be tolerated. And he didn't want to consider the possibility that his father was working with devils. He believed his father was a good man. He couldn't imagine why he would ever do something like this, but he was prepared to consider that possibility. So he went with the party. They went in, they confronted the Emperor, and he actually let them in and told them the story. That the hero Drathel, who would eventually become Mao's husband, Mao being the goddess of the Mamino, well, he was set to kill the new demon lord who had emerged, that being Mao. But of course he went out. That's not what ended up happening. He ended up marrying her. And the Empire did not take that very well. They thought she had bewitched him or something. But what really happened in more detail was there was a woman who loved Drathel, absolutely loved him, and she was fully planning on confessing her love to him after he came home from his mission. But of course that didn't happen. Instead, she found out that she married the demon lord he was supposed to slay. And she really did not take that well. Even she eventually married the man who would become the emperor, but she still held that bitterness in her heart over what happened. So much so that one day the Obsidian Heart visited her, and she told them she wanted revenge on Mao. But the problem was, Mao was a goddess. That was pretty much out of their range. So the next best thing was taking it out on her children, on the Mamino. And what had happened was, she basically allowed the devils in, and they killed the emperor, took his place, and basically were working their will through the empire. She was responsible for everything that had happened. And yes, so the man they were talking to was in fact Lord Kulzu, who revealed himself and attacked them, so the fight was on. They fought him. They managed to banish him. They didn't kill him though. So the prince was absolutely horrified by what he learned. So when the guards came in asking what was happening, he told the guards to come with him. They went to his mother's room, and he ordered this man to hold her down because everyone who had made a contract with these devils bore the mark of a black heart on their chest, like this little mark to indicate that they had made the deal. He hesitantly stepped forward and removed her jewelry, and sure enough, the mark was there. There was all the proof he needed. So, with a heavy heart, he ordered his mother arrested for treason and for consorting with devils. He was pretty distraught over the whole thing, but at least now they knew the truth, and now things could improve. He was crowned emperor, and he vowed that they would make amends for all the wrongs they had done to the Mamino and to their own people. It was going to be difficult, but things were finally looking up for them. So there was one thing left to do. The party had to confront Lord Kulzu and make him pay for what he had done. So they had to actually travel to Hell, and they had to bargain with the Lord of the First Layer of Hell, Bel, who was like a big military commander in Hell and was in charge of the Blood War, which is this war the devils wage against demons. And they eventually did manage to bargain with him, because he explained to them that Lord Kulzu, the number of souls he was contributing was not as much as the ones he was bringing in according to his calculations. For the longest time, he was willing to ignore this because the amount of souls he was bringing in was still significant. But now he figured it was now that the party was here, making it clear that their intention was to kill him, he made it clear that it was clear to him that it was time to clean house, so to speak. So he told them to, after they helped him with this quest he wanted them to do. It was nothing evil. It was killing another guy. I won't go into detail about that. But he told them to investigate Lord Kulzu, and if he is indeed using souls for his own purpose and running his own agenda, that they had permission to kill him. So, that was good enough. They went in and they fought Lord Kulzu, and they found out that the Obsidian Heart wasn't just a colorful name. It was the name of an artifact that he was using to carry out a lot of the stuff he was doing. And the artifact, turns out, was the heart of an old god, something he had discovered on one of his expeditions. So they fought him, and then the heart activated and became this huge, grotesque, eldritch abomination. They ended up having to fight that too, and they won. They beat it all. Lord Kulzu was left there, and Liana even gave him a chance to basically surrender, but Lord Kulzu said there was nothing left for him, and there was no course of action left but to kill him. So she did. So he kind of accepted defeat gracefully there, because it was clear that there was no hope for him now. And once that was done, Bel appeared and had the heart cast into the void where it would never be found again, because the heart was dangerous and he didn't want it endangering. So they had basically destroyed an artifact that could have caused serious damage to his realm. So Bel was quite grateful to them and offered them a chance to fight in the Blood War and have their names known and feared all over the realms, but they had had quite enough of devils for one lifetime, thank you very much. So with that, they went back home in triumph, and that was how it went. So it was a pretty good campaign. We got to get a lot more in detail in a lot of the characters, which I liked. I always liked being able to do that. Pardon me. But now I wanted to get into some of the philosophical questions that the campaign had raised that I'd thought about a lot. Mainly the concept of heroes who refuse to kill. That's been quite a debate that rages on a lot, especially in comic books and stuff like that. This is kind of my take on it. A lot of people say that characters who follow the no-kill rule are hypocritical, they're endangering people and stuff like that. And I would very strongly disagree with that notion. And this is why. Like, let's take heroes who do kill, like the Shadow and stuff like that. People say, oh, characters that don't kill are just perpetuating the cycle. They're not solving anything. If Batman just killed the Joker, he would end things right there. And to that I say, really? Take a look at heroes like the Shadow or the Punisher who do kill. How much have their situations improved due to them killing? Need I say more? I mean, the city the Shadow operates in is still corrupt and dark. The city the Punisher operates in is still corrupt and everything. Like, it's not like you can just keep killing and eventually evil will run out. That really doesn't work like that, because your enemy isn't people. The evil people are just a symptom of what you're fighting. And I think the difference is, heroes who don't kill, they recognize that people aren't the real enemy. It's the idea of evil that they're fighting against. And why does Superman not kill? For example, he's one of the good examples. It's because people think it's because he's naive or stuff like that. I think it's because they have a view of the bigger picture. Like, Superman could kill Lex Luthor, sure, but would that stop evil from happening? No. Others would inevitably take his place, and the cycle would just go on. So that's not what Superman does. Why Superman does what he does is to set an example for other people, because that's what really makes good triumph over evil. If that makes any sense. I think that the best reflection of how good a hero you are is this question. Would you want to live in a world where everyone acted like you? Like, would you want to live in a world where everyone acted like Superman? Yeah, that'd be pretty good. Would you want to live in a world where everyone acted like the Punisher or the Shadow? Yeah, probably not. And I think that's a problem. And I've heard people say that heroes who don't kill are hypocritical. I would say quite the contrary. I mean, it's essentially killing is wrong except when I do it because I have a good purpose. Well, really, how many villains go with that mentality themselves? It's just something to think about. That's not to say you should never ever kill. If your hand has been forced, well then so be it. But It's still something you have to accept responsibility for. There are consequences to killing, and you do have to still accept them. So that's my take on heroes who don't kill. I think they get a raw deal from some people, and I think some people really ought to rethink them. Heroes who don't kill, I don't think they're naive. I think they're just taking a broader view of things. They're the ones who are in it for the long haul. They're in it to truly eliminate evil and not just play whack-a-mole with symptoms. It's just something to think about. But anyway, that was our second campaign and how it all went down in a nutshell. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll try to tell about the third one next chance I get, although it's a bit of a tough one to tell because it's kind of more of a collection of smaller stories, if anything. But I'll get to that when I get to it. Until then, be aware and be wise.